So, for today's movie review, I'll be reviewing the 1998 American direct-to-home video film, The Mighty Kong, directed by Art Scott, who was primarily an animated television producer back in the 80s because he worked on a lot of Hanna-Barbera cartoons ranging from Scooby-Doo to the Herculoids, and this was his first and only film he ever directed before his passing in 1999. And as far as the actors go, I only recognize the one actor, that being Jodie Benson, only because she provided the vocals for Ariel in The Little Mermaid, both the theatrical film and the animated TV show. And although I'm not familiar with Dudley Moore's filmography, from what I could gather, this was his last film role before his death in 2002. And the film also features a bunch of musical numbers done by the Sherman Brothers, who have been known to work on various Disney films from Mary Poppins, J.J. Bang Bang, to a bunch of animated Disney films from that time period. And growing up, my relationship to this film was, I was very aware that this movie existed, but I never bothered watching it because I think I was at that point in time where I was starting to grow out of animated films. And this film essentially faded into obscurity because it never saw life beyond VHS, so that's why you don't ever see this film on DVD or Blu-ray. And it wasn't until maybe a couple years ago that I discovered that this was an animated musical adaptation of the 1933 King Kong story. Like, something about that just blew my mind. A King Kong film I'd never seen. And again, like I said, the movie never saw life beyond VHS, so trying to find a copy of this to watch was hard to find until recently, by coincidence, because when Kong Skull Island hit theaters, I swear to God, a couple weeks later, this film showed up right out of nowhere, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna watch it now before it fades back into obscurity, which leads me into my biggest question: is The Mighty Kong a good animated adaptation of King Kong? Now, normally I would give a plot synopsis of what the movie's about, but like I said earlier, The Mighty Kong is essentially a animated musical adaptation of the King Kong story. In terms of what I liked about the movie, the animation, as far as the landscapes go, are really nice to look at when they're not moving, because if I was to take a still image of the landscape, it's actually very nicely drawn and has a lot of good detail, and the movie is very colorful to look at because of how vibrant the colors are in the film. Also, I think it's kind of cool to see a King Kong remake done in an animated movie, because we've had several live action remakes, but never one told in an animated format, which I think is really cool. Also, Jodie Benson has the best singing voice in the entire film, which is no surprise. And speaking of Jodie Benson, she also plays this incarnation of Darrow, who is a lot more feistier than her live action counterparts. Granted, yeah, you have Naomi Watts, who plays a much more sarcastic version of Darrow, and she does hold her own against Kong in that film, but with that version, it's just against Kong. With the anime incarnation here, we don't really see her hold her own against Kong necessarily, but we see her being really feisty towards the men, which I think is really great. But in some sense, I do feel like in between these two incarnations of Darrow, we could potentially have a very good incarnation of Darrow. In terms of what I disliked about the movie, where do I even begin? Because this movie is just a train wreck. Well, I guess I'll start with the animation. Because on one hand, like I said earlier, when the animation isn't moving, it's pretty gorgeous to look at. But then you insert the characters and or the monsters moving around, the animation doesn't look that good. Now granted, it's not the worst animated movie I've ever seen, but the animation on the characters is not that great. It's subpar at best. Also, the animation on the human characters is inconsistent as all hell, because the main characters look like normal people. Our supporting cast / minor characters look like something out of either Ed, Edd n Eddy or Hey Arnold. I mean, my God, look at that dude's nose. It takes up half his face. The editing's really choppy. There's random slow-mo from time to time. Also, the opening credits are shot really fast. Like, I had barely any time to read any of them, especially in the main title. Hell, when that came up first, I was like, wait, that was the main title? Shit, it just went by so fast I didn't even notice it. Also, the voice acting in this movie is terrible. Like, it doesn't even sound like people are giving a shit about their characters at all. It just sounds like, oh, yo, I'm just gonna do this to get a paycheck. That's essentially what I'm getting out of this movie, and their singing voices are 10 times worse. Like, my god, it just kind of reminds me of that one scene from the Nightmare on Elm Street movie where Freddy scratches his claws on the chalkboard. It's like that. And the musical numbers are atrocious as well. Because on one hand, yeah, the visuals are pretty dumb to look at. The songs are pretty terrible. Like, for example, there's this one musical number where we have Darrow kind of imagining that she's on this island, and apparently she's like some kind of princess or some shit like that. And the way this musical number plays out, we see dancing crabs, starfish playing guitars, and a fucking, like, army of tortoises playing musical instruments. This just baffles me so much. Like, when you think of King Kong, what do you think of first? A giant ape or a band of fucking tortoises playing instruments? It's just nonsense. Also, during some of these musical sequences, they show some CGI that's really bad. Like, it looks like a screensaver. And throughout the movie, there are points in time where the movie would insert random live action clips and mix them with animation for absolutely no reason. Like, I don't even understand why there's live action clips in that movie in the first place. And another thing that bugs me about the movie is the movie uses a lot of stock footage from the same film. Like, oh, there's a point in time where you have a bunch of sailors giving exposition of what Skull Island is, and then they show footage, which is essentially the opening credits with a different colored filter playing in reverse, and it doesn't stop there. Like, there are other points in time where it's like, oh, you might have a character reminiscing about the adventures they had on the island, and I'm sitting there watching this, I'm like, why is there stock footage of movie in this movie? Because the thing is, the movie itself is only an hour and 12 minutes, and that's including credits, so there really should be no reason for the movie to use stock footage from the same movie. And there's a bunch of characters that just annoy me, like Jack Driscoll in this movie. Most of his dialogue is nothing but yelling. Like, I can't even name a scene where he's not yelling. And also, there's like this kid and monkey character that really have no purpose in the film, other than the fact that, oh, we're in an animated movie, we have to aim at that kid demographic, so we'll just add a kid with a random monkey. Like, I could have done without them. Also, for something that's supposed to be a animated remake of King Kong, God, this is a terrible retelling of that movie, because with the original movie, 20 minutes in, we're at Skull Island. The next 50 minutes, we have a lot of interactions with the natives. 45 minutes, and at the 45-minute mark, for, well, I guess would be about 30 minutes, we're on Skull Island. Then the movie after that, we're in New York. This here, literally, half the movie, we're still on the goddamn boat, and we're only on Skull Island for 5 minutes. 5 fucking minutes. And between those 5 minutes, we basically cram in everything from one of the main characters encountering a dinosaur, Kong battling a T-Rex, a giant snake, crammed in 5 minutes. Like, if I decided to watch this movie when I was younger, knowing that it was a King Kong animated movie, I would be so disappointed that we didn't spend more time on Skull Island. Also, King Kong in this movie, we don't really get a sense of what he's like as a character, because we only see him in the movie for like maybe 8 minutes, and that's it. Also, I don't know why, but anytime you see King Kong in an animated film or TV show, he almost always has cobalt blue fur for some goddamn reason. I don't know why, but he does. So for my final verdict of The Mighty Kong, this movie is terrible both as an animated film and as a King Kong remake, because the story is told poorly, the animation's subpar, the voice acting's terrible, with the exception of Jodie Benson, and the musical numbers are atrocious to listen to. So overall, The Mighty Kong is perhaps the worst remake of the King Kong story ever to be put on film, and should be forgotten. So before I give my final rating, what did everyone else have to say about The Mighty Kong? Looks like the movie's got very mediocre to below average ratings. Honestly, I think they're kind of generous with those ratings, because I give this movie a 1 out of 5. So, out of the animated Kong movies that exist, which one do you think is the worst? And see you later.